Welcome everyone, 6 o'clock on Wednesday, November 18th. Welcome to Real Talk San Mateo, episode 7. Today we're going to be talking about policing and people with disabilities. My name is Michael Haobsh. I'm the Public Information Officer for San Mateo Police. We're going to start our episode with a very short video, and then we'll come back and you get to meet all these fabulous panelists that are going to be with you tonight.
I so often hear people send the message like, thank God that's not me, when they see someone with a disability, or like, thank God that's not me or my kid. And that's sending the message that disability is equal to someone who is less than or broken or incomplete, and that's not the case.
Well, I have cerebral palsy. It affects me pretty much from the hips down, and also just like fine motor control and things like that.
So I have Tourette's syndrome, which is a neurological disorder, which means I do movements and noises that I can't control.
I have cerebral palsy, as well as left hemiparesis and nystagmus, which means that my whole left side is weaker than my right.
I have a very aggressive form of lupus, and I have a blood clotting disorder associated with my lupus. And 4 years ago, I had a clot in my foot. And then this, in over 8 months and 11 days, this was the end.
I love having Tourette's. I love that I'm 4'7". I love my obsessive compulsive disorder. And I think that's the case that many of us have embraced our disabilities.
I've had my disability since I was born, and it's a part of me.
My brain is quick and witty and wildly inappropriate, and it also has Tourette's. And at some point, I decided not to just love parts of my brain. A lot of times I see kids staring at me. That's okay with me.
I welcome it. Kids are curious.
But what I struggle with is when a parent shushes them or quickly pulls them in the other direction.
When a child is hustled away from a person or hushed, it stigmatizes even just asking the question.
Because kids then associate disability with feeling ashamed.
And if they've never seen anything like this before, they're gonna look. And if they have questions, let them ask. There's nothing wrong with that.
So instead, I hope that parents say things like, how cool that we all move differently and walk differently and talk differently. More than just like normalizing disability, but celebrating it. We date. People with disabilities date, and not always other people with disabilities.
Just because I have a disability doesn't mean I have to be paired with somebody with a disability.
Direct message to everyone in my life, but if you're gonna set me up on a blind date, please have more criteria than this guy also has a disability.
Not every single person with a disability is in a wheelchair. I am not in a wheelchair. I've never been in a wheelchair.
If one more person calls me an inspiration after just meeting me, I'm gonna burn your house down.
We aren't inherently inspirational or brave because we are disabled, which is kind of the idea that people think about when they say that.
It's okay to call me an inspiration once you know me or know something about me, but genetics does not make me an inspiration. Let me earn that word.
There are people who are actually doing amazing, brave things out there, whether they have a disability or not.
But it comes across to a disabled person as, wow, I'm so happy that I'm not in your shoes.
I get a lot of strangers trying to help me up the steps by grabbing my arm or my waist or something, and that's extremely inappropriate.
You can say, hey, do you need some help? Rather than just either forcing my chair or ignoring me. It took me a while to actually call myself a person with a disability, but I'm a person first. Being an amputee is secondary.
I'd rather have somebody say I'm a person with a disability rather than being disabled because of the whole control and ownership issue.
I hear differently abled. Ugh, the word is disability.
I used to call myself like differently abled, and some people didn't like that, and I'm just like, but I am different. And they're like, no, you're not. And it took me a while to actually see that I was using very able-bodied terms.
It should be a descriptor, just like I'm right-handed. I have a disability. when we're talking about disabilities, I hear the word that we want to be accommodating, which is great, or we're working on tolerance. Nobody wants to just be tolerated. Like, I tolerated those 3 years my sister was learning to play the trombone. I tolerate going to the dentist. None of these things are things I like, they're things I tolerate because I know that I have to deal with. So there's such an important step in communities between opening the door to somebody with a disability and like embracing them and building a community with them in mind.
All right, welcome everyone. Got everyone's AV on. All right. So good evening and welcome to Real Talk San Mateo, episode 7. Thank you for joining us online. We know a virtual meeting isn't the best option for this forum, but we hope that after COVID restrictions loosen, we can all sit down at the same table and work together moving forward. If this is your first time tuning in, we encourage you to look back at our last 6 episodes on YouTube. Know that diversity is important to us, and recognizing the differences in our community and how policing affects each group is important. Real Talk San Mateo has been wildly successful, and as your police department, we've grown from these conversations, and we thank each and every one of you for attending, and for all of our panelists who've contributed in all 6 and now 7 episodes. This month, we are going to be talking about policing and people with disabilities. Our panelists will have a conversation from about 6 to 7 p.m., give or take, and we're going to have an hour open to dive into community feedback, and then a Q&A portion from 7 to 8 p.m. We'll have a hard stop at 8 p.m. Out of respect for everyone's time. For tonight's meeting, we want to know how our department is doing, how we can improve our police contacts out in the community, how we can improve our communication, and the outreach to the disabled community. We're going to hear from officers regarding our training, how our law enforcement response is, and we're going to hear from people who have disabilities and as well as the advocates, in addition to folks who are going to be calling in. We're conscious of everyone's time and understand this 2-hour discussion is just a tiny snippet of a broader conversation that we must continue to have. This is just the beginning. This dialogue is not intended to come to any particular decision or consensus, but rather to hear a variety of perspectives and engage in a genuine, respectful dialogue around this topic. We've prepared some questions for our panelists based on the questions that we've received over the last couple of months. If you'd like to submit one right now, feel free to use our Zoom Q&A option. We're monitoring Facebook Live since we are broadcasting on Facebook Live, or you can email us to pdpio@cityofsanmateo.org. That's PD like police department, PIO like public information officer @cityofsanmateo.org. Closed captioning will be provided on YouTube after the video is uploaded tonight. Anyone watching this video in the future, feel free to send us an email with your questions. Know that we're just a phone call away, or an email, or even a Zoom meeting. We've lifted the veil of secrecy here from the police departments that some people think that we have. Here in San Mateo, we pride ourselves on being approachable and accessible to our community. So feel free to give us a call or email us anytime you have a question, especially about Real Talk San Mateo. We love our community and having these conversations, so let's just keep doing it. Before we get started, I'd like to toss the mic over to Chief Ed Barberini for some opening remarks.
Thank you, Michael, and good evening. My name is Ed Barberini. I serve as your police chief here in the city of San Mateo. Welcome to another edition of Real Talk. The idea behind Real Talk is twofold. One, here at the San Mateo Police Department, we recognize that the needs, the wants, the priorities of our communities may vary from community to community. And it's our job and our challenge to make sure that we're adequately addressing those and remaining aware of what we can do to best serve those we're tasked with serving. These conversations have proved fruitful for us in being able to identify what those areas are and the needs of our community. But we realize that it's not an effort that will ever really be completed. We're going to need to continue these conversations, and we intend to do so on a monthly basis. So welcome. I'd like to thank Michael and his partner Janine for putting this together. They do a fabulous job of coordinating these episodes. I'd also like to thank our panelists. Without our panelists and our experts in the fields that we've addressed over the last several months, none of this would be possible. So thank you for your willingness. Thank you for your openness. As I mentioned, there are two kind of goals behind this effort. And one is for us to learn, but two, as Michael mentioned, we want to, in any way possible or in every way possible, to help familiarize the public, those that we see driving around every day, with what we do here at the police department and who we are. So I'd like to thank our police officers, Steve and Carlos, for joining us tonight to kind of help personalize who police officers are, what we do at home, what we do at work, what our lives are like in doing this job. So we hope that we obviously want to learn a great deal from the conversation as a police department so we can improve, and we hope that you learn a little bit about the way we do things. So again, welcome. If you haven't viewed one of our episodes before, as Michael mentioned, I would encourage you to take some time and go back. And please stay with us. We're going to try to continue this on a monthly basis or so, and we'd love to have you as regular viewers, whether it's live or taking a look at one of our social media avenues to look at it later on. So have a good evening. I'm excited and interested to listen to the conversation myself tonight. I'm going to step away and let our experts go at it. So Michael, thank you again, and I am eager to listen tonight.
Thank you, Chief Barberini, for your message. As a department, I speak for every staff member that we're lucky to have you here. Thank you for your continued support in Real Talk San Mateo and everything that we're doing here in the city. We're really, really lucky to have you. And before I forget, the City of San Mateo is soliciting feedback via survey from the community on disability accessibility. This is the final step of a year-long process to assess our city's accessibility. Our consultants have been studying our streets, sidewalks, buildings, and parks, and now they want to hear from you. Please visit cityofsanmateo.org/ADA for links to the survey for individuals and organizations that serve people with disabilities. The survey is going to be open until January 15th, 2021. But might as well get it out of the way if you can. Just jump on it tonight or tomorrow and give the city your feedback. All right, we've solicited the expertise of our leaders in the community today, and they are actually the stars of this show. So we'd like to introduce you to your panel. Panelists, if you can, just come on one at a time. Tell us your name, what agency or organization that you represent, and a couple sentences that describe yourself and what you bring to the table tonight. I'll go down my list just to make things a little easier. So let's start with Officer Steve Bennett.
Hi guys, I'm Steve Bennett. I've been a police officer in San Mateo County for 18 years and in San Mateo for 14 years. Some of the roles I hold at the police department and probably some of the reasons I was invited here. I'm a member of our crisis negotiation team. I've been a school resource officer. I work detectives, special victims. I'm a field training officer. And then again, with 18 years of police experience, another interesting perspective I bring is before I was a police officer, I was an elementary school teacher. So I received specialized training in working with students with special needs, and that was my career before I became a police officer. So thanks for inviting me.
Great, thank you, Steve. Next is Ligia Andrade Zúñiga.
Hi everybody, my name is Ligia Andrade Zúñiga. I am currently a commissioner for the Commission on Disabilities in San Mateo County. And I serve on other boards and commissions throughout the area as well as in the state and on the board of directors for the Center for Independence of Individuals with Disabilities here in San Mateo. I am a person living with a disability. In 2009, I sustained a spinal cord injury from a motor vehicle accident. And so I'm paralyzed from the chest down, and I got entrenched in the disability justice and disability rights movement at that point in time. So I've been in this for about 11.5 years, and I have a history of civil rights and social justice in the area. So thanks everybody for joining us today.
Thank you, Ligia. Paula Tobler?
Hi, my name is Paula Tobler. I've been an attorney for 30 years this year, and almost 23 years ago, I was in a major auto accident and ended up with post-traumatic stress disorder and traumatic brain injury, and was not able to work at all for a long time. Had a long road to recovery, physical and disabilities as well, and have worked my way back, and now am an attorney, and for good reason, have been attracted to disability rights work. So it's a pleasure to be here and talk about some of the people that have maybe invisible disabilities or mental health disabilities that may not be well understood.
Thank you, Paula. Great to have you on. Ben McMullan?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Ben McMullan. I'm the Systems Change Advocate at Center for Independence of Individuals with Disabilities, where I've worked for 10 years now, all in all. A system example of the systems, criminal justice system, police system. We work to make all systems more accessible and usable for people with disabilities. And I'm connected with statewide national organizations and very much working with different organizations within the county to that end.
Welcome, Ben. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Gloria Brown?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Gloria Brown. I am retired, but co-founded a health committee some 25 years ago through Mills Peninsula. And at that time, my husband was diagnosed in 2015 with Alzheimer's. Thank goodness for the health committee. I had a lot of educational programs that I learned something about the disease. I am his caregiver along with a paid caregiver, but Arthur had an altercation in 2017, which led me to being an advocate for those with Alzheimer's. And so I've been working with the Alzheimer's Association since then.
Good to have you on here, Gloria. And if you missed episode 5, Gloria is a return customer. This is her second appearance on Real Talk San Mateo, and we had a fantastic conversation in episode 5, and we're so happy that you came back.
Thank you.
And it's proof that all the panelists are going to survive tonight, right?
Absolutely.
Painless. Officer Carlos Basurto.
Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me. My name is Officer Carlos Basurto. I've been a police officer for 15 years. I am an emergency vehicle operation trainer. I'm also a person living with physical disability.
Great. All right, thank you. Thank you, Carlos. All right, well, thank you to all of our panelists. Oh, I'm sorry. I don't know why. Sorry, Inge. Inge and Florence. So Inge, can you go first?
Hi everyone, I'm Inge Verschueren and I represent AbilityPath. We're a large organization in the Bay Area and we support adults with developmental disabilities. We support them in employment, independent living. We have community access programs and we have day programs. And just recently, we also started supporting people with traumatic brain injuries. So I love what I'm doing. Love working with our adults.
Thank you, Inge. Welcome. And Florence?
Hi, I'm Florence Wong, and I'm a commissioner on the San Mateo County Commission on Disabilities. Just want to also say that I'm not representing the whole commission's opinion. This is my own views, and I know the same goes for Ligia. She's representing herself. I'm a clinical psychologist. I also am the mother of a daughter with moderate severe disability. She is autistic. And I've been an advocate for inclusion and awareness of children with disabilities in my local school district for years. And I've been on the Commission on Disabilities since February of 2019, and I was really interested in being on that commission because I was becoming alarmed at the statistics about abuse in the disability community and how it often goes unreported, and I really wanted to see what I could do to help pursue justice, essentially, and also prevent abuse. And the nice thing about being on the commission was I was able to start networking and meeting people from amazing different departments within the county and beyond. And with the district attorney's office, I have partnered with Elisa Kuhl, who's the manager of the Victim Services Division in the DA's office, to put together a group, co-organize the Abuse Roundtable group, which focuses specifically on abuse in the disability community. And one of the unique aspects of this roundtable is we really wanted law enforcement representation. And I really want to give a shout out to Chief Barberini. He was probably the first law enforcement official to respond to my wide-ranging invitations. And I think this was back when he was still with San Bruno, and then he came over to San Mateo. And thank you so much to Captain Dave Norris for coming to our meetings. It's been actually very, I think, touching to people who are advocates in the disability community, because we often don't have the ear of law enforcement right there. So it means a lot to us, and I hope that we can still maintain these partnerships and collaborations for a long time to come. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Florence. We're not going anywhere, so we love everything that you just said. We're going to continue to foster this relationship. Big thanks to all of our panelists who graciously volunteered to join us, and thank you to our community members who are showing up, and we're going to be part of the discussion too later on. Know that our officers are watching and listening this talk, and like every profession in this country, we would be remiss if we were not trying to get better at the job that we do as public servants. So now that we've had a chance to meet our panelists, let's get to know our attendees. We're going to launch our first poll. So the first poll has two questions. So one, do you live in San Mateo? Do you live and or work in San Mateo? And the other one is, do you have a disability, chronic organic brain syndrome, or are a caregiver for someone who does? So we'll give everyone an opportunity to vote, all the attendees. All right, got everyone. All right, it looks like 57% of our attendees live here in San Mateo, and the next largest, 29%, are people who are not associated with San Mateo. We welcome you. Welcome to San Mateo. And then for the second question, do you have a disability, chronic organic brain syndrome, or a caregiver? It's 50-50. So 50% of the people here said yes, 50% of the people said no. So we welcome you all. And let's jump into poll number 2. Poll number 2 is, what's your age group? And what ethnicity do you identify most with? And what gender do you identify as? If you can, just jump into those. We take polls every time we host these. I know when the Peninsula Conflict Resolution Center hosts or facilitates these, they're big proponents of taking polls. It's a great way for us to get to know who we're reaching, and how we can do better as an organization with our marketing and making sure that we're reaching different segments of the population. Just a few more seconds if you want to jump into this poll. We almost got everyone. All right. Great. All right. So it looks like 65 or older is our biggest audience right now, and then followed by 35 to 54 and 25 to 34. Great. And then the ethnicity, it looks like highest percentage, 75% white, and then 8% Asian, 8% Pacific Islander, and Hispanic or Latino. Welcome all. And then gender, looks like 50-50. All right. So let's launch into these questions, which is why we're all here. So this is for the panel, and I'd love for everyone just to jump in on this. There's been a lot of talk recently about redirecting funding from police to social workers in order to better deal with those with mental health or intellectual or developmental disabilities. What's your take on this issue? And based on your answer, how would you address the need for an immediate police response, especially when someone is a danger to himself or herself or others?
Should I just unmute myself and talk?
Yeah, let's just dive in.
I have a lot to say about that. I do have, like I said, PTSD and TBI myself, and I've gone through some rough times. I've never had a 5150 call, but I also was a conservator for 5 years for a Native American tribe and worked with people with severe mental illness, also with autism and some other issues. And I also have a lot of friends and even friends and acquaintances who reach out to me because they're concerned about family members with major mental illness. And this is an ongoing discussion because oftentimes police need to be called out because family is concerned about someone, but now there is also the concern that it will end up being worse if the police are called out than if they had not been. And that's not a result I think that anybody wants. Also, when I was talking to some coworkers, we were talking about parents of children who have behavioral issues who might run away from home, and the parents desperately want to keep their child safe and want help finding their child, but at the same time they're concerned about what will happen if things get out of hand or are misunderstood. So I think it's really important for the police. I don't think they're going to be out of the business of responding to these calls anytime soon, especially the 5150 calls. The police have to be involved. But at the same time, I think it's really important to have people who are trained in dealing with mental health issues. That should be with you on those calls. And I think the police should have more training in that. Because honestly, if you go there and you don't know what you're dealing with, that's as disastrous as for you as it is for the community. This is not a good solution. You didn't go become a police officer because you wanted or took a bunch of schooling in mental health issues, And there are so many different issues out there that I couldn't even tell you everything that you might come across and how to deal with every specific issue. But the more you have trained people with you, the more that you're trained in de-escalation techniques, the more you're aware. And also one thing that we've been working on in the disability community is having people who call into the police department be more specific about what is going on with the call. So the more you know about it, the more you can be prepared and not feel like you have to, be over prepared or prepared for something that might not happen. But I think it has to be an ongoing discussion. And I really do think that some of the funding that is going for more traditional policing and traditional police training needs to be shared with mental health and make it a partnership rather than a competition for funds. because you're not going to solve their mental health problems, and you're just going to keep getting called out to things that I've never known a police officer who actually wants to respond to those calls, honestly. And it doesn't always go well.
Well, that makes perfect sense. I know, Gloria, you have something to say. You know, one thing that I just wanted to add on with Paula is that, you know, our officers, and we're going to get into the training and the nuts and bolts of that. I think Officer Bennett has some information on that. But one thing that we haven't mentioned is that, you know, our officers also have had, some of them have had previous, you know, past careers. Like for me, for instance, I worked in nursing for 7 years before becoming a police officer, which has helped me tremendously while working out in the community. You know, as you know, when I worked in nursing, you're predisposed and you've got the education to identify certain issues, right? And you just see things through a different lens. And so we have those people here in San Mateo. Those police officers are serving the community today, right now. And that's one thing that we offer, but we'll get into the training and stuff a little bit later. But I think, Gloria, you had something to contribute.
I just wanted to concur with Paula. I think that officers being trained, and I knew you were going to talk about that a bit more, but the reason why I've become so involved is because my husband did have a very terrible experience, and it ended up with him being taken down to McGuire. It ended up with us having to spend $10,000. It ended up with us having to go to court for a year for the judge to dismiss the case and to wish us good luck. And I think that Alzheimer's, people with Alzheimer's are going to experience what my husband has experienced. And I think that there just needs to be those who are in positions that can help to de-escalate the situation. This should have never happened to us or any other family that has gone through what many of us have gone through. So I commend the city of San Mateo because after 3 years, this happened in 2017, after 3 years and seeing George Floyd helped me to realize that I needed to say something. And ended up with a very good conversation with police, with Chief Ed Barberini and with Michael and others, which resulted in the police officers going through the training that they did through the Alzheimer's Association. So I just think that more of this kind of thing needs to happen.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I've personally taken that training, and it was extremely valuable.
Yes.
Can I jump in for a second?
Please.
I agree with Paula and Gloria. Part of the problem, and I hear what you're saying, Officer Haobsh, about you all having, you know, other trainings and things like that. But it's also intimidating. The uniform, the presence, it almost comes to a point of like, am I in trouble? You know, and that might escalate the situation instead of de-escalate it. You know, for example, the situation with Yanira Serrano Garcia in Half Moon Bay. I mean, things like that just shouldn't happen. That's why we really do need people who that is their only job and their specific job to address mental health issues or whatever other situations that are. And the other thing is that there are so many different disabilities that we, you know, you can't, you know, possibly know them all or know how to deal with it perfectly as somebody who is a professional in that specific field, you know, can. So I think Paula said, you know, it's not that we're gonna completely have you guys out of a job. That's not it at all. You're very valuable. We do need you. We have emergencies that we need to have addressed, you know, by law enforcement. But again, you know, leaving specific issues and situations to people who are the experts in that field.
It makes sense. I don't, the lady that you mentioned in Half Moon Bay, is that the woman with the gun? Is that?
She had a knife and she was shot.
A knife. Okay, there was a woman with a shotgun in Half Moon Bay recently.
Oh no, this was years back.
Okay.
She, I think in like 2015 or something.
Okay.
Yeah, she was a young lady, very young, like 18.
I'll research
at
that
the night
one.
and was going through a crisis.
Okay, it's a different agency, so not San Mateo Police, but I'll do some research on that one. Thank you all for your contributions very much.
Can I say something? Oh,
please.
Are you talking about? I just wanted to say that it also goes on the other side where you need to be thoughtful about who you hire in terms of being your mental health person. I'm a clinical psychologist. I've seen a big array of skills in this field, and not everybody is fit for this kind of situation where there's a lot of tension, a lot of stress, a lot of adrenaline happening. You have to find the right fit for a police department as well, not just anybody who has a history of, working with the disability community or in mental health. It has to be the right special person.
And we have, in one of our episodes that we have on our police accountability page, you'll see the vetting process. And it takes a while, almost a year in some cases, to actually hire someone from the moment they submit their application and going through their interviews and the background process in the police academy, in addition to the college requirements that we have here at the police department. I encourage you to go take a look at that if you haven't already. It was eye-opening, I think, for me.
Well, that's an excellent point too, because as someone with trauma and who's been in places where I'm aware of how much trauma is out there, it is hard to find therapists and psychologists who understand trauma. So, finding someone down a police force is really going to be harder. And it's true that if you even are getting mental health professionals, you need to make sure that you're getting people who understand what you're dealing with. And a lot of that can maybe happen too with reaching out in the community and understanding your community better, so that these people before you're seeing them on the streets or before you're getting these calls, that you understand what's going on and who these people are, so they're not just a name when you get a call, and what communities you're dealing with and what kinds of issues you're dealing with. Because I know it's made a huge difference to me. I've had I was in a car accident, but I've also had other car accidents that triggered my PTSD. And I've had really good experiences with law enforcement that has really been helpful when I've been triggered on the side of the road. And then I've had some that have been very difficult. And so it makes a difference.
It really does.
I think even for us, it comes up a lot of times to help us or to support our participants with mental health. There's such a complex and challenges, even just trying to connect with them on any kind of level. So, and it's impossible almost to find someone in mental health specializing in supporting all the area of disabilities that are definitely on a cognitive level. I think it's a whole different experience to try to support adults with cognitive challenges.
Mm-hmm. I know Post oversees all police officer training and standards in the state of California. And Post, I know, solicits this kind of feedback, and they actually look to experts to train police officers at a certain standard for the entire state. So Officer Bennett, can you tell us a little bit about what training we get as police officers in just a basic police academy, and then what we've done here at San Mateo to help deal with situations like the ones that we're hearing, or working with people with disabilities in general?
So I'll go through the basic chronology maybe of our training. It starts in the police academy, which is a 6.5-month academy. There's a whole learning domain based on just dealing with or working with people with disabilities. They're called LDs, learning domains. It's learning domain number 37. The entire one is dedicated to just that. But that's a classroom training. After 18 years, it's interesting to hear some of the things. I'd say I'm very well trained in dealing with it now, but most of the training has been kind of on the street. But in San Mateo County, I think we're way ahead of it. So after the classroom training in the police academy, San Mateo officers within their first year of employment attend the crisis intervention training. This is something that is put on by our county, and it's not just classroom. It's scenario based. It's a lot of people from the community come in and present to the officers. So it's a lot of kind of hands-on, real deal training and dealing with mental health. San Mateo, that's just the training, and again the ongoing training, the Alzheimer's trainings that we were just that we just got to take. I agree that was extremely valuable. And Gloria, if you had some part of that, I appreciate that. My father actually passed away from complications with Alzheimer's. And that's something to recognize, that police officers not only have the experience on the street and the training in the classroom, but a lot of us have personal experience. Again, my father, and that was something we went through for years. My older daughter's 13 and she has a physical disability. She has scoliosis. So that's another perspective I have. So it's important to recognize we have plenty of officers who have children with autism and other physical and cognitive disabilities. Mike touched on all of our sort of personal experiences. A lot of us had other careers before we became police officers.
Steve?
Sorry, you guys still there?
Yeah.
My internet likes to turn off about every 5 minutes for about 10 seconds, so I apologize. I don't know exactly where I left off, but I was talking about the personal experiences that many officers had, either in previous careers or at home with their families and children with disabilities. I don't know if you got cut off before.
No. Can you also talk about SMART and then how we're going to be onboarding a clinician in-house?
So I was getting there. Again, I think San Mateo County is way ahead of the game. 100% of police officers would agree that with you, like you were talking about, Paula. There are a lot of police are necessary in a lot of situations, but there's so many situations where a clinician or some other emergency response would be better or more appropriate. We end up there and we're just kind of the middle person for, oh, I'll fill out a form and then get you in an ambulance. Well, San Mateo County kind of we have a workaround for that. We have the SMART program with the San Mateo County Mental Health Response Team. And it's a team of their paramedics who are specially trained to work with people in mental crisis or people in crisis and ones that we're often called to, where we get there and instantly recognize this is going to be a SMART call. They drive an SUV, they come out, they're dressed like paramedics, they're much more unassuming. The police uniform is taken out of that factor is taken out. And it's easier for us, it's easier for the person in crisis, and it's a great solution the county has. I think every police officer would agree, we would love to have SMART, 4 or 5 SMART units on duty 24 hours a day. They're limited, they usually have either 1 or 2, and it's not 24 hours a day. It's, kind of 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. or something like that, where they're usually available. And then I know the city of San Mateo and a couple of other cities in the county are the first to be looking at actually bringing on a clinician full-time to work at the police department. And that would be a resource similar to SMART, where we would call them out. But obviously even a clinician's qualifications are far beyond those of a police officer or a paramedic. So I think both of those things are things important to realize that are going on in San Mateo. And they're both great resources for us. All that being said, I like to say, or I like to think, police officers spending so much time doing this, so many of our calls deal with this, we end up just getting pretty good at it. I like to think that. I'll throw it back to you.
Thanks. Can you just add a little bit more about, because I know that you're one of our department's crisis negotiators. So if there's a crisis out in the community and we have to do, if it's a barricaded subject and SWAT is called out and stuff, that a crisis negotiator is married to that unit.
Yes.
And you did that just last week. We had an activation. We've had a couple of activations most recently. Can you talk about your role as a crisis negotiator?
Yeah, be happy to. So we do have a very specialized team of crisis negotiators. It's a position in the department, like a specialty, like detective or anything else, where you would apply for it and you would interview for it, and if you're chosen, you're sent to very specialized training, a few weeks out of the city, where your job full time is training to deal with people in mental crisis. It used to be called the hostage negotiation team, and that's a strange name because maybe 3% or 5% of what we actually deal with would be a hostage situation. So it's been appropriately named the crisis negotiation team. And you're right, very often we're usually just negotiating with someone in crisis, and more often than not it's someone with a weapon, and that's why just a clinician wouldn't be brought in. But we're backed up by the SWAT team, who come in for the safety concerns. And yeah, we've had a couple of very dramatic call-outs. Just last week, a homicide suspect went back home and then was negotiated with for several hours while he was in his apartment with his wife. And that's something the negotiation team was called out. We have a dedicated space in a vehicle when we do a negotiation. The team, we're all trained to work in every role. There's a primary negotiator, a secondary negotiator. We have people doing intelligence for us so we can learn about how to best help this person. But it's a very specialized team of people who are trained further to work with people in crisis.
Great, thank you. Officer Basurto, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, if you don't mind. First, I want to thank everybody for their stories and their experiences. It's huge. And those life experiences really teach us and continue to train us in our job. I do want to share with you that we do take it very seriously. And I'm speaking about myself. And I know other officers feel the same way, especially in San Mateo. I know there's plenty of times when we actually go into a incident with mental health, and it really pulls on our heartstrings a lot of times. And we try to provide every service and resource we can and try to find a solution. Unfortunately, sometimes there's not a solution. But we do try as hard as we can. And then also afterwards, what we do is, I know for myself, is I will actually talk to my peers and I'll talk to my supervisors and I'll say, hey, this is the solution that we had, or this is the outcome that came about. Is there anything I could have done better? Is there any other resource that we could have provided? I totally agree that, more training is always better in the police department and police in general. The more training we have, the better officers will be, and that's our main goal. But I did want to let you all know that I know there have been plenty of times, at least for myself, after an incident, I actually have to take a deep breath, and I hope and I pray that the decision that I made will have a good outcome. And there's a lot of times where we don't see the outcome, but we hope that it does, and we hope that they get the help that they need, who are, as police officers. So
Absolutely.
Thank you all again.
Thank you, Carlos. And Officer Steve Bennett was talking about crisis intervention team and what they do, and we'd love to just show you a 60-second video of just what that is. So let's just jump to that really quick.
And deal with everything from pesky kids on skateboards to bank heists. And while officers always strive to do their best, sometimes they encounter situations more suited for social workers, like dealing with mental health crisis calls, which is why we have crisis intervention teams. CIT programs teach law enforcement officers how to safely de-escalate mental health crisis situations. In fact, law enforcement agencies that have CIT programs in place have reported as much as an 80% decrease in officer injuries during mental health crisis situations. Not only do CIT programs educate officers, they also bring together community members and mental health care providers to offer convenient options for treatment and to reduce the number of repeated calls for police service, saving officers valuable time. Take the next step in helping your community better respond to mental health crisis calls. Learn more about CIT programs by visiting NAMI.org/CIT.
Great. Thank you all. So with that, Paula, I'll just throw this question to you. Do you have any suggestions for officers when it comes to working with people who are experiencing an episode related to PTSD, or someone that may be experiencing some sort of mania? You know, we've heard about de-escalation and the triggers that some people have, and how you know, others may and I remember you mentioning others may show like signs of fight or flight. How would you recommend we approach these situations, or anyone you know, who may have a disability that we can't see, like you mentioned earlier today?
Well, I think first of all, it's really important to realize that like somebody with PTSD is not in control of their response when they're triggered. Like if you have a fight or flight response, you're going to have a fight or flight response. If you've had treatment and you've been in therapy and you've learned coping skills, then you can come to a place where you can get yourself under control. But like, that is not the time to be expecting people to even be able to listen to your commands, never mind obey them, or, you know, or if you take someone with Alzheimer's that's just confused and doesn't know, or you take someone with a developmental disability that just is trying to even figure out what's going on and what you want from them. So I think the most important thing is to stop and think and look at the situation, talk to the people around. I mean, family members might be there, other people that are witnesses. I was a witness to an interaction between a man on the street that police officers were talking to. And I have a mental health background as well as a law background. And I just said, you know, stand back a little farther. That's a very aggressive stance, and ask him what's going on. And they were willing to try that, and it made a difference. But I think part of the problem is also the emotional regulation. I mean, if you come into a situation hot and thinking there's something going on, and you've got this call that, you know, there's a potentially violent person or somebody's been triggered, and people watch too much TV and movies and think that a PTSD triggered person is gonna, you know, be a Vietnam vet that's gonna, you know, start shooting at everybody or something like that. When actually your most common PTSD victim is a woman who's been sexually assaulted. Your most common PTSD response is not necessarily fight. It could be flight, it could be freeze. You could realize, like for me, I was in a car accident where it was so bad, it triggered from my first initial accident where I got the PTSD. It was too similar to that one. It triggered it. My daughter has, she was in college at the time, and she has a voicemail message where I'm screaming her name and hyperventilating, and I don't ever remember ever calling her. I wasn't unconscious, but I did not know what was going on. And the police officer investigating that accident made me sit at the side of the road where all the like overturned cars and things like that were, while I waited my turn for him to take my statement. That was hell. And did it really matter? I wasn't going to go anywhere. Could you let me sit aside away from it where I didn't have to look at it and be like trying to calm myself down in the middle of this trauma? Think about things like that. If you come in, when I worked with people with major mental illness and I had to calm them down, I actually had to sometimes put them in hospitals that it was never against their will. I would talk to them into it. Sometimes it took a long time, but going in and being in the calm presence, you know, and talking to them. If you go in the uncalm person, then what chance do you have of calming down the temperature in that situation? You have to be the adult in the room. So you have to have a different mindset. And I think that's where some of the problem comes in, that there isn't this training and I hope there's more training now, but this training that you're coming in there to solve a problem. Sometimes people have guns and sometimes violence is going down and you need a crisis intervention and you need to, you know, draw weapons and you need to react quickly. But a lot of times all you need to do is stop, ask what's going on, ask what do you need? You know, why are you freaking out? Is there something that we can do to get a statement out of you? You know, family members, what is going on? Why did he run away? Is he dangerous or is he just, you know, oppositional? What works with this person? I think and those are the things you got to realize too, that, you know, you can do these trainings, but mental health professionals go through years and years of training and also clinical practicum experience and real life experience. So keep learning, but also keep working on your mindset and on your stance when you come into a situation. The really good situation that I'll end with was, I was at the side of the road freaking out. I had 2 young children at the time, and I couldn't get myself to move the car. So a police officer came over to find out what was going on. And he said to me, you know, I've seen this before. It happens when you've had a bad accident. If I drive you somewhere, you may be stranded and not be able to get back to your car. But I'll give you my card with my cell phone number on it. So if you change your mind and you do want me to take you somewhere or you need more help, call me and I'll come help you.
Wow.
I didn't even have to call him, but just having somebody who stopped and said, what are you doing out here, you know, and why are you freaking out and why are your kids crying and should I call CPS? Just said, what's the situation? How can I help? And if you need more from me, I will come back and be your safety net. I was able to get myself together and drive myself home. And that meant a lot to me. That meant a lot to me. And to my clients, it meant a lot to them when they had interactions with the police that were good. And it also was very salient when they had interactions with police and also with EMTs, that they're not always a solution, because EMTs also drag them off to hospitals, tranquilize them, you know, wrestle them to the ground and things like that. But
can I add to that too, Paula?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So like what Paula's saying about learning from these situations and what Officer Steve and Officer Carlos just said, you're learning each time you go through this. But I think, and this is going to be kind of, I don't know, provocative for you guys or not, but so Officer Carlos says he thinks about it, it weighs on him, he seeks out feedback to try to learn more about it. I don't know that every officer does that, you know. I don't know the percentage of officers who would do that. I don't think that the general public thinks that it's the majority of officers. It's kind of those special ones, like ones who would want to come on this kind of panel, you know. Are you a self-selected group that is just more open-minded? And so my question to you is that, so Officer Carlos, if you are in a situation where you see another officer did not react very well and actually made a situation worse, but that officer doesn't seek any feedback, doesn't seem to have learned from that situation, would you be comfortable approaching your fellow officer and saying, hey, you know, kind of thought about how you handled that and, you know, thought I'd give you a couple of pointers? I mean, I don't know what the dynamic is between officers. Can you do that comfortably? Because I think that would help a lot.
Steve and Carlos, why don't you respond to that? I know, Florence, thank you so much for mentioning that. And Paula, your stories were great and really appreciate your input. What we're finding at Florence, this is what I think that this is what you were mentioning. You know, what we're finding is that, unfortunately, YouTube, Facebook, social media, the news, you know, they're capturing that you know, 1% or 0.1% of law enforcement, right? And what I've found in my 14-year career is that most of the cops that I work with are like Carlos and like Steve and like, you know, Chief Ed. They're just good people that are true guardians and trying to protect the community. Sure, there are bad apples, absolutely, and we want them out just as bad as anyone else. And identifying them and getting them out is part of, you know, part of our process. But I want Carlos and Steve to talk about it, because Steve's the field training officer. He actually trains officers out there that experience that, and he evaluates them. And then Carlos, you know, has been a veteran for many years, and so they've interacted with these officers.
I think to start, and Florence, you touched on this earlier too, different clinicians, different mental health professionals have different strengths and different weaknesses. And not 100% of what we do is dealing with mental health and all of that. It's just one of the things we do. So you're probably right in that the officers that wanted to participate in this particular forum, that might be our strength. And I have other officers who rely on me. But we all know, as officers, just like anyone in any profession, know who's really good at certain things and not as good at others. So as long as we can, we're always going to rely on who's on duty with that skill set to handle each call. That also being said, I think what you were asking was, is an officer willing to step in on another officer's call? And the answer is 100% yes. If one officer sees, Carlos and I are both more experienced officers, and the majority of officers in our department, just because of the economy and the climate in the Bay Area and all of that, all our officers are pretty young, or most of them are. So that being said, yes, Carlos and I would 100% jump in any call and intervene and go take over. And then afterwards, train the officer. One of my roles is a field training officer, so I'm very comfortable doing that, and I do it very often.
I totally agree with Steve, and I appreciate, again, everyone's comments. And with Florence, I do agree with, I'm glad you brought this up. And I think a lot of times personalities sometimes clash, or it could be something else. And what you'll see a lot of times, at least with our department, is you'll have 2 officers that come, or maybe it's 3 officers, depending if there's a trainee or whatever it might be. And you'll see this exchange, a handoff, if you could say, of when you're talking to someone who has mental health. And I'll be honest, there's a lot of times when, for some reason, there's a wall in between me and the person I'm speaking to, and which is an awesome thing that I have my partner with me, right next to me. And there's just this clear, my partner knows that we hit this wall, and my partner will come in and start speaking to that person. And a lot of times, just that exchange and taking me out of the equation, it's world of a difference. And a lot of times, if I'm doing something wrong, if I say something wrong, my partner will come in as well. I just had an experience just recently when I was actually talking to someone who was transient, who had mental health issues as well, or mental disability. And what happened was, as I was speaking to him, he started getting agitated and started getting angry, and his stance became very aggressive. And my partner, who was new at the time, actually spoke up to go ahead and stop this aggression. And I just put out my hand very lightly and just kind of stopped him. And he saw it, and we stopped, and then we continued to have a conversation. And it was a very, very low, very calming conversation. The person actually came down, and we talked, we got him help. We actually had SMART, the program that we had, came out, spoke to him, took him to the hospital, and we were trying to figure out different ways that we can assist him. So I can't speak for other police departments. With this police department, because this is my first and only police department that I've been with, I know that we practice that a lot. When we do go ahead, and I know Steve Bennett is a trainer, a field training officer, but we all take that role. And there's things that I need training on, and more experienced officer, sometimes experienced officer with less years on police force I'll ask them for information and how to be a better officer.
We're going to jump. I know we understand mental health is a huge part of what our officers experience, the calls and stuff out in the field. I kind of want to bring it back to other disabilities in the community. And I know, Ligia, you mentioned this. Ben talked about it a little bit. I'd love for us to talk about first language and putting the person before the disability and describing what a person has and not who a person is. And some people may call it like politically correct language or whatever, but I think it's just the correct way to say it. Could you talk about it? I'm going to share my screen. I know that you mentioned this earlier. If you just want to talk about it a little bit.
Sure. It's basically humanizing the person as a human being. We in our community, we're always human beings. We're always people before our disabilities. Although not everybody identifies that way. We all have our own preferences. But for example, for me and people that identify like I do, my disability is part of who I am, but it's not who I am. So saying, Ligia, the woman with the disability, instead of, the disabled woman. Because again, it takes away from who I am as a person, my identity, and that I am an individual person. There's a lot of great resources out there. I know the United Spinal Association has a really great disability etiquette handbook that you could find on their website and download that. It has all kinds of information, but it has a really good example of people first language, and then also of other types of social versus medical models of disability. When you take away the humanistic part of people with disabilities, it makes us feel as an other. It doesn't make us feel like we're part of the community, like we have value. It dehumanizes us. And so it's extremely important for people to really understand that. And I really dislike when people say politically correct, because that's not it at all, and if that is where people are coming from, then their heart is not in the right place of understanding. So I just recommend that people really explore that, and with different organizations, disability rights organizations and justice organizations that I'm part of, we're all on the same page with this. And there's also a step further as identity. What is identity first? Also, so again, there's all these different paradigms and all these different ways of addressing people. But then just flat out ask, how would you like me to? How do you identify? How would you like me to address you? Period. Because maybe I'm wrong. Maybe somebody doesn't want to be identified that way. So, when all else fails, just ask.
That's great. Ben, do you have anything to add? Oh, let's get you unmuted there.
Leah covered the large of it, but I have a pretty personal story. My mother was diagnosed with cancer at the end of her life. And I always made this point to her about, person first language. She was like, we love you, blah, blah, blah. Everybody cares about you. And then when she was diagnosed with cancer, she was like, oh my gosh, I get it now. I don't want to be defined as the cancer patient known as Ann. I want to be Ann, a person that has cancer, and that's, I believe, what people with disabilities, and no matter what group somebody is, they want to know that disability is just a part of us rather than defining us as people with disabilities. And I realize that there are groups, going back to our initial conversation, Michael, there are groups of disabilities that identify differently. But I do think if you start out with the person first language and like what Ligia suggested in just asking people, you know, if you're in doubt, that's a great place to start. And it goes a long way.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Ligia, for your contributions to the conversation. I know we have a lot of material to cover, and we're already past 7 o'clock, so I'm a little worried we're not going to be able to get to all the Q&A, but we're going to do our best. Gloria, I noticed that you've been trying to say something, so I want to give you the floor so that you have an opportunity to address us.
Well, I just wanted to say that I think oftentimes we leave out the family members. And I know on a few occasions, family members have tried to reach out to law enforcement to tell their side of the story after an incident, and they've been turned off. And so I hope that as we look at this and we continue the dialogue and to see how we're going to strengthen the relationships between law enforcement and the community, that we not leave out family members. I happen to had a good experience with Arthur's situation, but that's not always the case. And I think that we need to keep that in mind.
Absolutely, and that's what we have these conversations for. And you know, we're available off Zoom too. We could take phone calls and have meetings because we do want to keep this conversation going. And it's because of Gloria Brown that we actually brought that Alzheimer's training to the police department. You know, she met with Chief Barberini and we made things happen here at the police department. And it's just because of these conversations, you know, and so we're grateful. We're grateful for your bravery and your courage, Gloria, because you're making changes and hopefully it's a ripple effect and it goes across the country.
Absolutely.
Officer Basurto, most people don't know about this, but do you mind telling us, if you don't mind, telling the audience about the disability that you mentioned earlier on when we first started the episode?
Yeah, I'm actually an amputee. My left lower below my knee was amputated. I was in a traffic accident heading home. I fell asleep. I woke up right before I was going to hit a vehicle, swerved, but which caused my car to roll over. Because of that, I had significant injuries, internal injuries. I actually severed the artery in my right forearm. They were awesome doctors, medical staff, and they were able to get that back. And now I'm back to the force, you know, and so I'm super excited and happy. But I think, and just to touch on it, I know a lot of the panelists that talk about having people see who you are. And I think that's so important. This happened just a few years ago. And I'd like to say too, that, you know, I'd like to be Officer Carlos Basurto with an amputated leg, but I want to be me. And I know my disability is who I am too, as well. And I embrace it. And that's what I'm kind of hearing as well. And so, but the awesome thing is that we have this community, and we have in the police department, in the city, and also here right now, and we're talking about it and how we can better ourselves.
Thank you for sharing that story. And by the way, love the beard. I know it's Movember. Normally our cops do not have beards, but our chief authorized it this month to fund or recognize prostate men's health. So, so if we can, I know this came up in one of our pre-meetings. If the officers can address, can you tell us what types of incidents where the police generally come across like a person who is disabled and they're a victim? Can you recall like sexual assaults, abuse, neglect of caregivers?
Sure. Are you speaking more to physical disabilities or everything?
I think we're talking about the disabled community as a whole, and I know it's very broad and diverse, but that we're talking about the entire community.
Okay. And so much of what we do is with that community. I mean, you just named a few off. Specifically, we deal a lot with care homes or people who are conserved and that sort. They're often victims of sexual assault, of financial crimes, being taken advantage of, and just so many disturbing ways. But I mean, it's so much of what we do is dealing with that community, which is good. But it's a good reason we're having this conversation. And I'm learning a lot tonight. Yeah, I mean, especially now with all the COVID, gosh, 25% of the calls we go on are just a welfare check. Hey, I haven't heard from so-and-so in 3 days, or I'm worried about them because of their mental health. They said something concerning online. Can you go just check on it? And then sometimes we get to that house and we learn so much more. We see hoarding situations, or someone who hasn't left their house or taken care of themselves in months. So I think so much of what we do is really, it's all intertwined.
Absolutely. Thanks for sharing that, sharing your expertise. And this question's for the panel. Based on what the officers have shared tonight and what you personally know, what can we do as a police department to educate our disabled community about crime prevention? And how do you encourage the community members who are reluctant to report crime to the police? And anyone can jump in on this one.
Well, one of the things that got brought up in our abuse roundtable group from somebody who had worked in a lot of the care homes, that sometimes as a behavioral modification, component, people will threaten residents with, I'll call the police if you don't eat all of your peas, or, they use the police as a threat in so many situations. And so it's already, going against any officer who's going to show up, because instantly that person's going to be afraid and have all kinds of thoughts going through their mind that they're in trouble. One of the things, and I don't know if you guys still do this sort of thing, is just, actually go into a community setting and just introduce yourself and get to know people, and they'll see you as an ally and someone they can rely on, rather than an ally to the person who's actually hurting them. So, which is, probably what they think. And especially if somebody has a developmental disability or intellectual disability, they're going to believe that. They will believe that their abuser or somebody who's mistreating them is friends with the police, and that they don't have anyone that they could go to get justice or share what's happening or to get the abuse to stop. And I don't know what the solution is, except that the police have to somehow have a more personal relationship with individuals in the disability community. And the more that's happening, then the more outreach they'll do. That it's very, there's no simple way to do it, because so many messages that they're getting set up the police to be a threat. And that's what really pains me, especially as a mother of a child with disabilities, developmental disability, is that who is going to take advantage of her later when I'm dead and gone, right? Who could she go to for help? Would she feel she could trust a police officer? Could she, you know, like, I don't have that answer. And that's why I love, you know, that we're talking about this, but it does fill any parent of a child with a disability with just dread about who will protect this person. And
you do have the answer,
really
Florence. You do have the answer. It's creating those relationships. It's inviting police officers to come engage, you know, at different centers. I know that we go to homeowners association meetings and classrooms, and we do that throughout the year. I know just last month I presented to 40 kids who have Down syndrome, and we talked for, I think, 2 hours, and they got to know me. And so experiences like that, regular experiences, and then when we're past COVID, coming out to coffee with a cop or sitting down and having a meal with us and allowing us to break bread with you, I think stuff like that, I think, helps a lot. So
right, it's just very labor intensive and slow.
Yes.
Partly what we try to do, we try to encourage to make those kind of connections, but I think honestly we have not really thought about making a lot of connections to police force, I guess. I remember one time we did have in like a K9 unit, someone who came, which was great. But I think we can do a lot better in trying to, when I was talking to my peers, all our experiences have been pretty positive as long as our participants are in program, but we're more worried about when they're not in program, like when they come from their job or they're on the bus and something happens. Also to be said for those that already said, like, be aware of family around, caregivers, people that know the person really well, that actually definitely have their communication challenges. There's such a wide variety in how they take information. I don't think, even for us, sometimes we do not know how to handle certain situations. So how can someone who just walks into, get called in, you as a police, can handle that situation? So I think looking out for anyone who can support the individual. And then if there is no support, maybe a responsibility for us to teach or give our adults tools to maybe react, ask for help. I don't know, more communication, more.
Absolutely.
Yeah, building bridges, I guess.
Yes.
Yeah.
One of the things that entered my mind at that round table that Florence brought together, and it still continues, is a liaison of some sort. Whether it's within the department or like you're saying, building bridges with community partners, such as like Center for Independence and the police department, if they could work together and really know that there's a voice of a person with a disability working alongside, such as this forum and our work going forward, to say somebody with a disability can identify to somebody working in that space, you know, that might go a long way. Of course, it would look a lot different. I can't even define how it might look. There's various ways you could do it. But just to add a face to make that connection as well.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ben. Ligia, I noticed your hands raised.
Thank you. I just wanted to suggest that we re-inform people of their rights and give them back that part of their power that I know a lot of us are very dependent on other people for our care and you know, our supplies and whatever else they're there is in our life, and that sometimes takes away a piece of our independence, a piece of our I guess of our ability to know that we have rights and that we are powerful. So perhaps, I don't know, create some sort of little workshop for people with disabilities where you can communicate, look, these are your rights, and regardless if you are soliciting the assistance of another individual that's there to do your personal care, you still have rights. And part of the problem with the community that does utilize assistance from others is being without. And that really prevents people from explaining what's happened, from reporting things, because the alternative is they will have no care. So maybe that could be part of it, like helping people create some sort of emergency plan in the event that they encounter a situation that they're uncomfortable with or that is abusive, that they could have something to fall back on. And as a community, we definitely should think about that stuff with our community partners, with our nonprofits. What do people do in the situation where someone has been being abused and they need to be removed from that situation, and now they have no care? Like, what do? You know, and so that is part of the reluctancy in our community. But again, you know, giving people back their power, and regardless, you can still report things. You still have rights.
Yeah, and thank you for mentioning that. It reminded me of a question I wanted to ask Paula. 30 years ago, the Americans with Disabilities Act was signed into law. Can you talk about the rights that people have who have disabilities and how they can learn more about them?
Yeah, there are a lot of resources out there. There's a lot out there now because it is the 30th anniversary of the ADA. And in fact, California law has even stronger protections for people with disabilities. You can go on the website of Disability Rights California or other disability rights organizations. You do have the right to accommodations, like in public places and housing and things like that. And that's actually another place where we see police involvement is, you know, businesses or even public agencies will call the police because somebody is there that is acting out, and they decide because they have a mental illness and that they have to call the police, and it goes south. But I think a lot of it is just realizing that people with disabilities are people, you know, that they want to have jobs and are able to do jobs. You know, accommodations in the workplace are not about charity, honestly. I'm a really good attorney and I really pull my weight in my job, you know, but I have a disability. All of our board members either have a disability or have a family member with a disability. You know, the fact that curb cuts were required was a big, you know, event, and yet now people use them for strollers and all kinds of things besides wheelchairs. A lot of these things that we fight because they're the unknown and because we think that that's for other people have actually been beneficial to all of society. So I would say, you know, be aware of your rights, talk to disability rights attorneys about your rights. There's a lot on the internet. Be willing to enforce them. And when you're hearing people say things, and that was another thing I wanted to say about the people with disabilities as victims, especially people with major mental health issues, they're never believed, and they're often victimized because they're never believed. Like, I had clients with schizophrenia, horrific stories. I worked for an anti-trafficking agency, and I would actually respond to psych wards on hospitals to interview people. And they were never believed because, oh, they're crazy, which is a word you shouldn't be using to label people anyway. But think about it. What better victim do you have than somebody who will never be believed because they, you know, they don't make any sense. They're just making things up. Or somebody who is dependent. So the more we empower people with disabilities, the better society we have, because they are adding their skills and their power and their strength to our businesses, to our neighborhoods, to our communities, to our lives. They're watching out for each other and we're watching out for them. We're building a community that is stronger because it recognizes all people as having worth as human beings, not based on what boxes they fit into or don't fit into.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that and for all of the work that you continue to do in the community. You mentioned rolled curbs. We're going to switch gears a little bit. For Ligia, in the past, you've worked with us, with the San Mateo Police Department, to promote education when it comes to disabled parking, education and enforcement. As someone in a wheelchair, can you tell the audience why it is so important for drivers not to block or park in a disabled parking spot, or even across rolled curbs or in a handicap access ramp or on the street corners?
One of my favorite subjects to talk about. It's so frustrating. So we have our vehicles that are all accommodated for our needs. Some of us have ramps that come out of the side or come out of the back, and we need that extra space to be able to get out of our cars. Some of us don't necessarily have a ramp, but we have a manual chair that we break down and throw in the back and put back together, and then some of us have walkers and other mobility devices. So what it does is it prevents us from fully participating in our community. It prevents us from getting to the store. It prevents us from doing what we need to do, picking up our medications, doing our grocery shopping or laundry, whatever. And it's just flat out disrespectful. For every 25 spots, we get one. So in a parking lot of that many spots, if there aren't any others for people who are able-bodied, then they can use one that is maybe a little further, but just don't use our spots. Again, it's 1 out of 25 parking spots. And it takes a while. It also is time-consuming for law enforcement to have to come out and write a citation. It's like that time could have been utilized for something that's a little bit more pressing. There have been so many times. There was one Valentine's Day when my partner and I went out to dinner, and then we were going to go see a movie, but instead we went to dinner and came out and had to deal with a 2-hour situation where some guy was parked in the striped marks right next to our car, and we couldn't get into our car. We couldn't figure out where he was. Law enforcement had to be called. They finally found the guy, but it's like 2 hours later, and then by that time we're like tired and cold and just want to go home because we're so mad, and so just be mindful. Just like you're just going to run in for a second, that prevents us the ability to do the same. So, yeah.
It's a good point. Officer Bennett, Ligia brought up a good point. She was talking about someone that was parked in the crosshatches there, the blue zone. Can you tell us what makes a disabled parking spot enforceable, a violation enforceable, and how much the fine is? And then also, can you tell us a little about like rolled curb and how people should actually be parking when they come up against a rolled curb?
Okay. First off, parking enforcement is not my specialty. Normally, I'm okay with sort of looking past the little things, but we here to make you feel better. Please never feel bad about calling, because that is the one violation I will happily come quickly to come enforce. Well, my dad, when he was alive, and my mom currently have placards, and it's just human decency to respect that one. I
actually think you were the one who responded to the call that day.
Oh gosh.
I think it was you. It was a while ago, but
okay.
And it's so funny. Wow.
Well, now you know I have a personal sort of connection, personal feeling about it. And most officers do. Most parking violations are $25-$30. A handicap violation is in the $300-$350 range. So when I put that little ticket on the windshield, there's some satisfaction that that person thinks, oh, I'm getting a $20 ticket. Like, wait till you get that one in the mail. But yes, the fine is the same as if you park in the spot or if you park in the spot next to it, which is the striped area. So that's one thing to point out. And then you talked about rolled curbs. San Mateo has a lot of narrow streets in the north end, on the east side. And you have to realize those sidewalks, I understand you want to protect your car and your rear view mirror, but those sidewalks need to also be available to people who are in wheelchairs or other mobility devices to get by. So that's something to think about in San Mateo, the road curb thing. I come out all the time and someone's parked a very expensive car all the way up against the bushes on the sidewalk, just because they're afraid of being sideswiped.
Right, and we just put up an image that's also on our website, our traffic portion of our website, where it's important not to go past the rolled curb, because people with in wheelchairs, using walkers, strollers, they need access to the sidewalk. Take a look at that. And I'd like to, I know we're a little late. I'd like to turn the floor over to our attendees. If you have any feedback, any contributions, if you have a question for any of our panelists, can you please raise your hand? And while you're doing that, we'll go into our third poll. If you can, just take a look at our third poll. So we're gonna launch it real quick. So we're curious, you know, what's been your personal experience with the San Mateo Police Department? Everyone attending can submit your answer. Great. All right, so it looks like we got everyone, got about 55% of the attendees who have no experience with the San Mateo Police Department specifically, and then 45% of the attendees have had positive experiences with the police department. So, and then 0% have had negative experiences. So that's really good to hear. And let's jump into the next poll. How useful has this been for you? And did you hear a perspective that's similar to yours? And are you interested in future community participation? Take some time to fill that out. Great. Looks like we got most people. All right. So it looks like 60% thought that this was awesome. So I'm glad. I think that's fantastic. And then did you hear perspectives similar to yours? So 90% said yes. That's really good to hear. And are you interested in future community participation? So we got 100% said yes. That's really exciting. Great. Get rid of that. Any attendees want to provide any kind of feedback, comment, questions for the panelists? Please raise your hand. Right now, I'm not seeing anyone. Oh, I just got one. All right. All right. Bryna, I'm going to ask you to unmute.
Go.
Welcome.
Hi. I am so impressed. I'm in San Bruno, But the officers, of course you would have a wonderful police department with officers like these. The fact that Officer Steve was a elementary school teacher, I know for a fact, because I'm a retired teacher, that, the kind of heart he must have. And same with Carlos. I'm so impressed with, I'm impressed with the panel. Paula as a disability rights attorney, actually everyone, Ben's comments about that, I'm just really very impressed. I know that it's just, you're San Mateo and I'm San Mateo County, but I really wish that some of the things that you're doing, especially the training that I'm hearing that, Steve, that you're doing, I wish would have been done in San Francisco, because I lived there before I came to San Bruno. I lived for 35 years in San Francisco. But boy, you folks sound like you have a model program now, and I'm very impressed.
Thank you. Would anyone like to reply? Steve, Carlos, anyone on the panel?
Yeah, I would like to say thank you. I appreciate it. I think you're giving us too much credit, but again, I appreciate it. I do agree. I think that the panel here with everyone and their comments and their experiences and their training, I think it's fantastic to be here. But and I thank you. I know in San Mateo that we try to do as much training as we can, and we'll continue to do that and think of creative training and creative ways to become better. Ultimately, we just want to serve the community and be able to be helpful in any way we can. So whatever advice, ideas that you have for us, please let us know, and we'll take it to heart, and we will see how we can fit it in or how we can do better.
Wonderful, thank you. Any of the other attendees want to make a comment or have feedback or a question? We have a bunch of experts that we were so fortunate to get on this panel.
This is Gloria again. I'd just like to say that I've learned a lot, so thanks to all of you. Perhaps some consideration can be given to maybe 2 times a year to bring different components from our communities together, and we can hear from our police department what the successes, some of the areas that still need to be worked on, getting feedback from us in terms of additional kinds of trainings that need to be done, just so that, again, to keep the dialogue going, because I think that that's just going to be critical. So I just offer that as a suggestion.
Couldn't agree more. And Real Talk San Mateo is going to continue on at least through 2021. And so we're going to keep having these conversations. We want to get better. We want to serve our community in the way that they need to be served. And so we're really excited about that. Speaking of serving our community, I'd love for the officers just to talk about how we currently support the disabled community. And Officer Basurto, if you wanted to talk a little bit, and then I'll turn it over to Officer Bennett with what we're currently doing.
I know we brought up many times. We're going through a bunch of training.
Well, we could talk about kind of like if someone needed to text 911, for instance, like that kind of service.
Yeah, so we have a text to 911 for anyone that needs to, and this is just not actually for those who are disabled. These are for anyone who might be in a situation where they can't call, and they can go ahead and text 911 to us. That goes to our dispatch service, and then from there they receive it, and they receive a text that comes out, and they can reply in a text as well. I think this is fantastic. Actually, before this, just really quick, I actually had a 911 call from a family who was deaf, and all we got was not audible. And when I went out there, we weren't sure where we were going to, what was happening. Luckily, we went out there and they had to explain to me, and I was able to write down, and that's how we communicated. But this right here is fantastic, to be able to know what the needs of our citizens are. And they get the dispatch, our dispatch gets it right away. The one thing I did go to dispatch, and they said the one thing that they ask, if please, if you're going to use this feature, say what you need, but make sure you put an address attached to that as well in your first text. And that's so important, because if they don't have an address, they don't know where they're going to go to. We have a GPS location, but that has an error on, or I think there's a certain range that that the GPS location will pinpoint, but it won't get exact location. And so if you all can do that, that would be fantastic.
Great.
But, yeah.
Thank you, Officer Basurto. Officer Bennett, can you talk a little bit about how we as a police department are participating in certain activities when it comes to the disabled community?
So in addition to all of the training and as much community participation as we can, one thing that law enforcement in California does in general, but especially here in San Mateo, is we participate in the Special Olympics. If you're aware of it's called the Law Enforcement Torch Run, and we run the Special Olympics torch. It's run from all the way from Southern California to the Northern California border. And just this past week, our officers, along with other officers in the county, carried the torch through San Mateo on El Camino. We ran several officers ran from Belmont to Burlingame, along with Special Olympics athletes. I think that's one of the biggest connections we have.
Great. Yeah, we stay pretty busy. So I would like to turn this over. I'd love just a closing statement from each of our panelists. And maybe we could start with Paula.
I just said thanks for allowing me to be here, but thanks for putting this together. I think it's really important to communicate with the community and try to figure out what the problems are and then work together to problem solve. Because how much better to solve these problems and work on them than to worry about who to blame when something goes bad, or to feel bad when something goes bad. And I hope that the other thing I've learned is that it's a really good idea to hire school teachers, because nobody knows de-escalation better than a bunch of elementary school teachers. So maybe law enforcement should be a second career. But I think you guys are doing a great job to even have this panel, and it's been a pleasure to be part of it.
Thank you, Paula. We were lucky to have you here. Inge?
Yeah, also thank you for allowing me to be on the panel. I really appreciated it. I learned a lot. I got a lot of ideas. I think just the importance of having a platform for people to speak up. I don't think problems are going to be solved soon, but I think just allowing people to be heard, I think, is really important. So thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thank you, Inge. Gloria?
I think the city of San Mateo is a role model that what you all are doing should be replicated in other police departments. And a start would be, our neighbors to the north and the south. And I'd like to see this be a countywide effort. So important.
That would be the biggest compliment. And, to what Brianna was saying, sorry, I'm butchering your name, but, that would be the biggest compliment for us. Thank you. Thank you for being here, Gloria.
Thank you.
Ben?
I just can't thank you enough for inviting me and the other panelists to be part of this important conversation. I look forward to continuing the conversation. Going back to something another panelist said, I don't know how often we can have this, but it would be great to revisit this conversation periodically and kind of grow this foundation going forward and just generate more ideas that we can bring forth.
Absolutely. We are very much looking forward to continuing this conversation. Thank you, Ben. Thanks for being here. Florence?
Yes, like everybody said, you know, I'm so appreciative of having this forum and being able to have a voice as a family advocate for the disability community. And I think I could see where San Mateo PD is just so much more ahead of a lot of our sort of neighboring PDs in terms of just wanting to engage with this community, because when I did send out those original invitations for that roundtable group, I sent it to every PD and I did not get a response from every PD. We had a nice, you know, small handful participate, but I think that the department's participation in multiple arenas that focus on the disability community is just such a testament to great leadership and a great vision for modern policing. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Florence. And Florence, you were such an asset at the start of this episode when we started planning for this several weeks ago. You were right there and super helpful, and I'm so grateful for all of your help. So thanks for helping us put this together, and thanks for being here. Ligia?
Yes, so thank you very much for putting this on and for having this conversation with our community. It's important that we're visible and we're represented always. We are part of this community too. But I also encourage people to check out the Center for Independence of Individuals with Disabilities, check out what they do, the Commission on Disabilities, and any other disability organization, just to learn a little bit more, because people would be more than happy to sit down with you and explain what those agencies do and how they serve our community. But most of all, for people with disabilities that are joining today, to also get involved, because this is the way that we bring forth what the needs are in our community to others. And without us opening our mouths and saying what we need, no one's going to know. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, and don't use the accessible spaces.
Yes. Yes, to be continued too. We're going to keep talking about that. Absolutely. Thanks for all your contributions tonight, Ligia, and for everything you've helped us with in the past. We really appreciate you. Officer Basurto?
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. And also thank you so much for the panelists and for all your comments. And it was very eye-opening, and it was great to see and all your wonderful ideas. I really appreciate that. I do want to say that, to our citizens and whoever as well is out there, please, anytime you see a police officer, stop us, introduce yourself. We would love to speak to you. We would love to get to know you. And I think that will help break that barrier that we've been talking about a little bit here. We do want to get to know our citizens. And we hope that people don't have a stigma or fear us, because we're here to help. We're here to protect. So anytime you see us, if it's on the street or if it's at a coffee shop or whatever it might be, we're there, we'll talk. I would love to meet everyone and just be able to get to know the community.
Thank you, Carlos. Thanks for being here. Officer Bennett?
I want to say thanks to everyone on the panel tonight. I enjoyed my time here, and I learned a lot as well. And I appreciate all of the perspectives. I don't have much to say. We're all very taken aback by Carlos's story. In 100 years, in 1,000 years, I would never think someone who had that injury would ever come back to this profession. And Carlos did. It's very inspiring.
Yeah, it was definitely a tremendous. Sorry, did you want to finish your thought, Steve? You paused there for a minute.
That was it. I know. Carlos, like you were saying, or you were finishing my thought, it was an extremely inspiring story. And so, but I just want to say thank you to everyone. And we're often called to call. So if you see us in the street and we look like we're, 80% of the time we're going somewhere, we already have an assignment. But I want to echo what Carlos said. Please stop and take the time to talk to us, to get to know us. We're people just like everyone else.
Absolutely. So just as a reminder, the City of San Mateo is soliciting feedback by a survey from the community on disability accessibility. As I mentioned before, it's the final step in a year-long process. So please go to cityofsanmateo.org/ADA for links to the survey for individuals and organizations that serve people with disabilities. Again, the survey is going to close January 15th, 2021. So thank you very much for joining us for episode 7, Real Talk San Mateo. Next month, we plan to do something a little bit different with Real Talk that we've done, and more of a summary for 2020, and we're going to get set up for a fantastic 2021. This series is going to continue throughout the year, and we have a lot of exciting plans for our future episodes. Be sure to follow us on our emergency alert platforms like Nixle, Nextdoor to find out what's happening in your neighborhood for timely and accurate information. And also on our social media platforms like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. Please visit us at sanmatopolice.org. Scroll through our police accountability page. There are a ton of videos, all of our Real Talk San Mateo series. This one will be on there too. And learn about the police department, how we're working hard to keep San Mateo safe. A big thank you to every single one of our panelists and our attendees who have contributed to this conversation. We couldn't have done it without you. Also, for folks needing a closed captioning, this is going to be uploaded on our YouTube page. And after the processing is done, there's going to be closed captioning on there too. So a big thank you to all of you, and see you on another episode. Have a good night.